Good morning and welcome to our session. My name is Ashraf Abdelwahab. I am the Industry Value Engineer for the public sector in Egypt. I am holding a PhD in computer science and AI. At the same time, I've worked for the public sector in Egypt for quite some time. Together with my colleague Jean Foy, we'll go through this interesting presentation about how COVID-19 is changing our world right now and will continuously change our world in the future.
Good morning, and welcome to the SAP Now virtual experience. My name is John Farr, and I'm an IVE based in Dubai, focused on the MENA public sector. Today, I'm here with my colleague, Ashraf Abdelwahab, and we're going to be talking about the impact of COVID-19 on digital transformation within MENA public sector entities, both in the short term as well as in the medium to long term. If you have any questions, you can include them in the chat below, and I'll also include my contact information so we can continue the conversation after the session. Thanks very much for stopping by.
Okay, thank you for joining us today. My name is John Farr, and I'm here with Ashraf Abdelwahab, we're both IVEs based in MENA South, and we're going to be talking about digital transformation within the MENA governments in this time of COVID-19 and what to expect beyond COVID-19. So the COVID-19 crisis is putting a tremendous stress on how public services are being provided for within MENA, both in the short term and in the medium to long terms as well. So if you look on the left side of this slide, you'll see the confirmed deaths of folks in the MENA region with the coronavirus, and none of the curves for any of those countries have started to flatten yet as of the time we're recording this. So just about every country in the region is still recording upticks in the number of confirmed deaths and in the number of confirmed cases, and it doesn't look like that's going to flatten soon. It's obviously not as bad as New York or Italy or a lot of other places, but it looks like it's going to be with us for quite a while. And this is having big impacts across public services, but we're going to focus on three broad areas today. Those are public finances, defense and security, and public health care. When it comes to public finances, we're seeing massive fiscal and monetary stimulus all across the Middle East. And in the medium to long term, that's going to put downward pressure on budgets available for different public sector entities, and it's also going to force serious spending reprioritizations across the public sector. And then, in addition to that, the oil price war between Saudi Arabia and Russia is also putting on, enormous stresses to government budgets within the region. On top of that, when you look at the defense and security space, a lot of police and military organizations that are trying to enforce quarantines and figure out how to react to this crisis are doing something that they haven't really had to do before on this scale. So we think that once this crisis starts to stabilize a little bit, you'll see those organizations begin to take another look at the policies and planning and training that they have in place for their people. And we think that they're also going to start to invest more in things like wearable technology, predictive analytics, artificial intelligence, and machine learning methods. And you already see regional security agencies applying those methods to try to enforce lockdowns, such as using robots and drones and things like that. When it comes to healthcare, the GCC nations seem to be able to handle the stresses of COVID-19 more easily than a lot of other regional governments, since they have more robust healthcare systems and they tend to be wealthier. And we think that those governments will probably be more inclined to do even more digitization of their healthcare services going forward. And we think that it's probably going to force even governments that do not have as much financing or that are lower down on the technology curve to try to take a closer look at what they can do to digitize their healthcare as well. And also, according to Gartner, Gartner expects this crisis to increase both short-term and long-term public sector IT budgets. There are other forecasts out there from other providers that I've seen, but Gartner expects this to really push digitization both in the short term and the long term, despite the downward budget pressures. So for the next slide, I'm going to turn this over to Ashraf.
Thank you, John. If we talk specifically on some areas that have been impacted by the COVID-19 virus, oil, of course, the GDP growth may decline by 5.7%, and still the prices going down affects in many countries in the MENA region. They got double hit by oil prices and at the same time the COVID-19 and its implications on the slow in growth. Although we hear about some talks about the conceptual agreement between Russia, Saudi Arabia, and the US on decreasing the oil production volumes, but still, this is still words, but we haven't seen something on the ground, and it will take some time, even if they agree to bring it back to a normal situation. The importers are also affected from the oil prices because many of the importing countries, they have workers in the exporting countries. So the transfers, for example, and remittances are affected by the slow growth and the lower value of oil in the exporting countries. Also, tourism is another aspect that has been really affected in countries that have tourism as main part of their income. Like, for example, Egypt. Closing tourism affects the economy in terms of unemployment, in terms also of the government income. So the problem with tourism is it depends not only about being safe, but also how you feel about safety. So it may take some time until people get back to normal in focusing back on moving around and travel in a safe mood. So it is not really foreseen how this sector will come back to normal. Of course, we have travel restrictions, and this affects the labor markets in GCC countries because these markets depend mainly on foreign laborers and expats. A major thing about Saudi Arabia, Umrah and Hajj, this is a very big events, two big events where millions travel to Saudi Arabia in these 2 months of Sha'ban and Ramadan, these main months for Umrah and Hajj. And this means a great impact for the economy in Saudi Arabia and also all surrounding transit hubs that feed this touristic pilgrimage going to Saudi Arabia. Also, the region in MENA, the MENA region, suffers from many regional conflicts in Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. Yemen, they declared the ceasefires a few days ago. We don't know how it will last. How this will turn the situation, the COVID-19 situation in these countries, most probably it will not be going to be in a better way because the lack of governance and the enforcement of measures in these countries is high. We don't know how this will evolve in the next few days for these countries, for the regional conflict countries. Although, of course, some of these conflicts are kind of supported by external players, so the affected countries cannot support these conflicts for a longer time. So maybe the lack of money will calm down this regional conflicts for a while. John?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Okay, so moving on to the first big focus area of government finances. So the main trend that we're seeing across the region is massive fiscal and monetary stimulus. The fiscal stimulus is particularly focused on vulnerable populations such as the elderly and pensioners. You're also seeing big monetary stimulus. Most of the monetary stimulus is coming into play in order to maintain pegged currencies to the U.S. dollar, since Qatar, the UAE, and a lot of countries in the region are all pegged to the U.S. dollar, so they need to make monetary changes to stick to that peg. And in addition to that, you're also seeing changes in things like bank lending rates and other loan rates available for impacted industries. In the medium to long term, we think that again, the oil price war is probably still going to continue putting downward pressure on budgets, in addition to the downward pressure being applied from all the fiscal stimulus. And you're probably going to see significant budget reallocations and reductions and different prioritizations across different government agencies. And we've seen kind of a sneak peek of that in Egypt, where their most recent budget is focused on increasing the budget for healthcare by 30%, social protection, as well as government salaries. So we might see similar trends across other regional budgets. In addition to that, we also might see a greater push for digital payments in order to minimize contact and to improve efficiency, and to make up for the fact that so many government employees are not at work now. They're working from home, and a lot of those government employees were trying to work from home because a lot of these government employees may not have the technology infrastructure available from their public sector employers to do their job effectively at home. So a lot of government tasks are simply not happening now because those agencies are not up to the task of doing them. Okay, moving on to healthcare. If you look at the left, if you look at the left side of the screen here, you'll see the total number of tests for COVID-19 per capita for just 3 countries: Turkey, Tunisia, and Bahrain. So that's all that we're able to find data for now, or sort of really good, consistent data from the same source. And I think it drives home the basic point that there's some of the smaller and wealthier countries, such as Bahrain, have very robust healthcare systems that are able to really do a lot of testing per capita, while you have other governments in the region that really can do very little at all. And that number of testing per capita is probably a pretty good proxy for how effective different healthcare systems are at managing this entire crisis. And in the medium to long term, you'll probably see greater demand for just improved healthcare services from citizens, since this is already putting tremendous strains on governments. And if governments are not able to respond well, then that could cause serious social unrest with people protesting and sort of not seeing regional governments as being as legitimate as they were before. We think also wealthier countries such as the GCC, which are already sort of very high up the curve in terms of making digital investments, are probably going to do even more when it comes to things like wearable technology, in order to track people to see if they're violating quarantine measures or not, and to provide instantaneous feedback to healthcare providers when it comes to their symptoms. You're already seeing this in parts of the world. In Korea and Singapore, they're using ankle bracelets as well as data from individuals' mobile phones to make sure that they're not violating different quarantines if they're re-entering the country, to make sure they're staying in their homes or their hotel rooms. There's probably also going to be a greater push to use blockchain applications within the healthcare system to track those who contract the disease, and to sort of allow them to move more easily, since if they've contracted the disease before and have recovered, then they likely have some degree of immunity to it and are at a lower risk of spreading it to other people. And there's also going to be a huge push to make supply chains more secure. You're probably going to see regional governments start looking much more closely at what measures they have in place to stockpile supplies for similar emergencies going forward. Okay, moving to our third area, defense and security. We see the defense and security organizations trying to respond to threats that they haven't really had to respond to before on this scale. And that's going to be a big opportunity for them to improve their operations and to make investments that they might not have normally thought about making. So right now you're seeing strict quarantines and travel bans all over the region. You're seeing the use of the military to enforce those bans. Lebanon, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia in particular have all relied on their militaries to enforce these restrictions. When it comes to technology investments, drones and robots are being used to enforce quarantines in Jordan and Tunisia. And there's also probably a greater risk of cyber attacks as more of these defense and security organizations are really being under increased pressure and stress, and they might have to use less secure digital channels to coordinate in the absence of having government offices open and in the absence of having access to their normal communication channels. So we think that if you look towards the medium to long term, this crisis is going to force these organizations to reevaluate their policies and their plans that they have in place to combat similar crises. They're also going to face the same stresses that other public sector entities are going to have in terms of potentially lower spending or at least different spending priorities. You might see a greater emphasis on training and workforce management to make sure that people that the employees of these organizations are using their time as efficiently as they can. And you're also probably going to see greater investments in things like data science, wearable technology, as a lot of organizations are being sort of forced to use these things for the first time. Okay, and in the short term, SAP has been doing a lot to help make sure the public sector entities can continue to operate and ensure a continuity of services at this time. Qualtrics is being used to reach out, monitor, and support call center agents and people that are possibly sort of testing positive for COVID-19. Artificial intelligence, methods can be used to help sort of locate and track different clusters of people that might be infected. Litmos is another tool that's being used for learning management in both higher education and in public sector training. Question Mark is another solution in that space. SAP is also offering Ariba for use for free to help manage supply chains. And a big challenge going forward is going to be public cloud, since a lot of security organizations like the National Security Agency in the United States, for example, forbids it, and a lot of other organizations have been sort of copying that model because cloud is seen as being less secure. So that will be a big sort of challenge and opportunity for organizations going forward as they want to shift to the cloud, but are worried about the security surrounding it. And in the long term, SAP can go beyond just helping to ensure continuity of operations and really help to strengthen digital channels and to make future crises less harmful across things like strengthening identity management and access control, as well as cybersecurity, using things such as DocuSign for maintaining digital certificates, Qualtrics being used again as an experience management solution, more advanced supply chain solutions as well as again further investments in AI, machine learning, and predictive analytics. Okay, so that's it for now. Thank you very much for tuning in, and our contact information is right here if anybody would like to reach out and continue the conversation. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Well, it was a pleasure meeting you today and had this presentation together. I hope it was interesting and fulfilling for all of you. And in case you need any more information and updates, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you very much for your time and stay safe.
Hello again. Thank you so much for attending the session. We hope you enjoyed it. Ashraf and I will be available in the chat room to continue the conversation, or you can send us an email or give us a call anytime to learn some more. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.